Hello, mortals! I am the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And it is time for another game of Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial way to pick books for your TBR based solely on their cover. And this is going to be my first Shelve It or Shove It for 2022. And we are looking at books released in December of 2021 to read in January of 2022. And I'll be looking at young adult, science fiction, and fantasy. First up in young adult is Here's to Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. And this is a sequel to What If It's Us? Well, I haven't read the first novel in this series, and it looks like a romance. I'm not that crazy about romances, as some of you may know. And I've only read one book by Adam Silvera, and that was Infinity Sun, which I wasn't that impressed with. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is If This Gets Out by Sophie Gonzalez and Cale Dietrich. And at a glance, I'm going to think this is a gay romance about a couple of teen boys trying to keep their romance on the down low. Really not that crazy about that type of gay love story, and I'm not interested in romances, but I mean, the cover is cute. I do like that this looks as though it was illustrated specifically for this cover, but not my type of book, so I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jasinska. And there's a little tagline that says, 2 rivals, 1 heart, and a kingdom ready to watch them burn. And I like this type of cover. I like these rich, saturated, illustrated fantasy covers. It looks almost like Frozen. It looks like the 2 sisters in Frozen, one with the white braid, one with the reddish auburn hair, and looks like they're wearing winter clothes, so I don't know what's going on with that. It says they're rivals with 1 heart, so maybe it's a lesbian romance. No way to know, but I like the cover. So I am going to shelve it. Next up is The Righteous by Renee Adia. And I like this cover. There's like a Victorian dress, but just the dress that's sort of floating on a sea of black. I'm going to assume it's maybe historical fantasy or maybe just historical fiction, but I like the simplicity of the dress floating on the cover, and I like that sort of mint green color. I think I'm going to shelve it. And finally in young adult is The Last She by H.J. Nelson. And not terribly fond of this cover. There's a photo of a woman with red hair, and the title is over across her face, and there are cutouts. And through the letters, you can see some sort of building. I'm going to assume this is some sort of post-apocalyptic story, young adult story, maybe about the last girl on Earth. And just not interested in this one. So I'm going to have to shove it. Now we move on to science fiction. First up, You Feel It Just Below the Ribs. Now wait a minute, I remember seeing this in Shelve It or Shove It last month. So why is it here for this month? I'm going to assume maybe something happened with publication and got delayed a month, so it's here twice. That's what I'm going to go with, and I didn't care for it then, I don't care for it now, so I'm going to shove it. Next up is Cyber Mage by Saad Z. Hossein. And I have to tell you, I love the name of the book. Cyber Mage kind of reminds me of Babylon 5. And other than that, it's hard to tell what's going on with this cover. There's a green burst, little red dots bursting out from the green whatever, so it's kind of abstract. The font is kind of interesting because it's kind of retro. So the question is, well, should I pick this book just based on the title? And even though this is my favorite type of cover, I do like it with the font and the colors. And honestly, just going by the title that sort of calls to me, I'm going to go ahead and shelve it. Next up is Square to the Third by Mira Grant. And this has some horror vibes in it. And it looks like a woman or a young girl going through this forest of plants with mouths and trees. I kind of like this one too. There's something kind of retro about it, and I like that horror aspect to it. She's facing another person, which could be herself or her enemy or something. I'm going to go ahead and shelve it. Next up is Memory Lane, and there's no author on the cover, and it looks very 70s, 60s psychedelic, but it also manages to look very generic. And I can't get over they don't have the name of the author on the cover. You know, this is in the running of one of the worst covers I've ever seen. Let me know if you agree, but hey, I'm going to have to shove it. And finally, in science fiction, Absinthe by Brendan Bellecourt. And I guess I like the cover, but I have no clue what it's about. It looks like a wooden door, 2 green eyes, and honestly, I couldn't even guess what this one's about. So I'm going to have to shove it. Now we're on to fantasy, and first up is The Veiled Throne, Book 3 of the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. You know, I've been wanting to read something by Ken Liu, but I'm not going to pick up Book 3 of his series. But let's just say that the cover is pretty intriguing. It looks like some type of religious or spiritual item you would see in the East, maybe Thailand. I don't know. It's kind of cool, but like I said, I'm not going to jump in on Book 3, so I'm going to shove it. Next up is Innate Magic by Shannon Fay. A narrow bone spells. Okay, so I guess this is part of the series. It looks very comic book-like. I kind of like the colors, but since I'm also getting Harry Potter vibes, I'm not really into the mood of that type of book. And like I said, it sounds like this is probably a series, so I'm going to shove it. Next up is The Untold Story by Genevieve Cogman. And it says it's an invisible library novel, so I assume that's the name of a series. And the cover is, There is a illustration of a spider. It looks like it's going down some type of winding staircase, maybe. Not feeling it. I'm going to shove it. Next up is The Liar's Knot by M.A. Carrick. And it's a mask that's very fancy in gold, and I kind of like it. Trust is the thread that binds and the rope that hangs. Anyway, it looks like a fantasy of some type. Well, of course, it's fantasy category. But I do like the cover, so I'm going to shelve it. And finally, we have Immortal's Honor by Rebecca Zanetti. And it says Dark Protector, so I'm assuming this is part of a series. And we get a shirtless man on the cover, so I'm going to assume this is fantasy romance. And no, this is not the type of book for me. I am going to have to shove it. So it looks like we have 5 books shelved. 2 young adult, 2 science fiction, and 1 fantasy. We have The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jasinska and The Righteous by Renee Adia. And in science fiction, we have The Cyber Mage by Said Hussein and Square 3 by Mira Grant. And in fantasy, we have The Liar's Knot by M.A. Carrick. And like I said, we're just going to pick a book based on the cover. And of these 5, I think I'm only going to pick 1 because we're just starting a new year and I don't want to overburden myself like I usually do. So, of these covers, I'm so curious of the young adult Midnight Girls because I swear it just looks like a retelling of Frozen, which I guess go for it. But the Righteous, I'm not getting enough about the Righteous of even what genre it is. So I'm going to say no to the Righteous. Let's hold back on the Midnight Girls. But looking at the two science fiction, Cybermage and Square 3, Cybermage isn't giving me enough from the cover either, but I am so curious about Square 3. So I'm going to say no to Cybermage and let's hold off on Square 3. And finally, The Liar's Knot by M.A. Carrick. As much as I like the cover, it's kind of generic in terms of fantasy. So I'm going to say no to The Liar's Knot. So it's between The Midnight Girls and Square 3. I'm going to go with Square 3. It's giving me Stranger Things, so it's giving me horror, and I kind of am in the mood for a horror novel because I haven't read a good horror novel that I've liked in a long time, and there is something a little retro about that illustrated cover. So let's go ahead and read the blurb. Okay, this is a long blurb, but here it goes. We think we understand the laws of physics. We think reality is an immutable monolith, consistent from one end of the universe to the next. We think the square cube law has actual relevance. We think a lot of things. It was perhaps inevitable that some of them turned out to be wrong. When the great incursion occurred, no one was prepared. How could they have been? Of all the things physicists had predicted, the fabric of reality might rip open and giant monsters could come pouring through, had not made the list. But somehow on a fine morning in May, that was precisely what happened for sisters Susan and Catherine Black. The day of the incursion was the day they lost everything: their home, their parents, their sense of normalcy, and each other. Because when the rift opened, Susan was on one side and Catherine was on the other, and each sister was stranded in a separate form of reality. For Susan, it was science and study and the struggle to solve the mystery of the altered physics inside the zones transformed by the incursion. For Catherine, it was monsters and mayhem and the fight to stay alive in a world unlike the world of her birth. The world has changed, the laws of physics have changed, the girls have changed, and the one universal truth of all states of changed matter is that nothing can be completely restored to what it was originally, no matter how much you might wish it could be. Nothing goes back. Okay, color me curious. This does definitely have a Stranger Things feel to it and also a little bit of Stephen King. And the name of the author is familiar, but I don't think I've read anything by Mira Grant. If you have, please let me know in the comments. But I am curious about this one, so can't wait to get started. Of the books we've seen, are there any that you would have picked just based on their cover? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.